Right. Now, I'd like to make this a bit participative. Now, two people here I know, two of my staff have snuck in without telling me. So, see what I'm going to be looking out for their feedback forms. So it'd just be interesting to know what kind of cross-section of people I'm talking to. So if you work in a provider organisation, can you put your hand up? That's interesting. Great. If you work for a local authority, could you put your hand up? Hi. If you're a family member of a service user, can you put your hand up? Nobody? Okay. If you work in the NHS, can you put your hand up? If you're a board member of the public who had nothing better to do on a Thursday and wandered in, can you put your hand up? Great. Okay, so you're mainly providers. That's interesting. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about our experience in CMG of working hard to provide high-quality services for our service users. Let me see if I can get this equipment to work. Yep, it's working. Okay, so to start off with, I'm just going to summarise what I'm going to cover in this presentation. So the topics I'm going to cover are what we mean by quality, and I'm going to say a bit about our quality rating system we have in CMG. I'm going to talk about getting the culture right, because that's crucial. Good services need the right culture, and good organisations do. Talk a little bit about how service users are at the heart of what we do. CMG wouldn't exist if our service users weren't there. They're our reason for existing. I'm going to talk about how we check quality to make sure it's of the right standard. Our approach to safeguarding, which, as you know, is an important theme these days. Talk a little bit about outcomes, what we're helping people to achieve, how we monitor that. Learning lessons from elsewhere. I think it's really important in the care sector that we learn lessons from what goes wrong in other organisations. The big example in our sector, obviously, being Winterbourne View. You're all familiar with Winterbourne View? Yeah, of course. And then last but not least, how we try and value and appreciate our staff, because without our staff, we can't deliver really good services. Okay, so we decided about a year and a half ago that we wanted to develop our own quality ratings in CMG. And the reason for that, particularly in England, with the change in CQC to compliant or non-compliant, it didn't really give our staff and our managers something to really aim for. The good thing about the old star ratings is it encouraged and motivated people to continue to improve. And we had some really healthy competition between our staff teams to see who could get to excellent first. We were the first national provider in England to achieve 100% good or excellent. At the time the system changed, we were, I think, 32% excellent, 68% good, but we had a lot of goods about to become excellent if they'd been re-inspected. And our managers were pretty hacked off when the system changed. So because we want people to continuously improve and not get complacent, we worked with our managers and our service users and our staff to design our own quality rating system. And there's lots of detail, but it's got 8 main areas. Service user voice, so to what extent are services listening to what people want, acting on their wishes, and using things like total communication to help people communicate if they prefer to use symbols, pictures, objects of reference. Outcomes. What are we helping people to achieve? Are we helping people to become more independent, have more friends, get a job, improve their physical health, their mental health? Staffing. Are our staff properly trained? Is turnover low? Is sickness low? Are people up to date with their training? Are they getting regular supervisions? Are they getting annual appraisals? Those sorts of things. Documentation. Boring but important. Support plans up to date. Risk assessments up to date. Are team meeting minutes very comprehensive? Do they cover all the things they need to? All those aspects of documentation that we know are important. Health and safety checks up to date, etc. Environment. Do the environments look nice? Are they homely? Do they reflect the wishes of service users? Do they reflect their cultural background? Those sorts of things are important. Safeguarding. We're really hot on safeguarding in CMG, which I'm going to talk to you a bit more about as we go on. But are our staff trained in safeguarding? Do they discuss safeguarding regularly in staff meetings and supervisions? And are we making efforts to help our service users understand their right to be safe and what they can do if they feel that they're being abused or mistreated? Health, self-explanatory, but that's not just about the health. Have you got a health action plan? Are you seeing your doctor regularly, etc.? But it's also, are you being encouraged to exercise regularly? Are you eating healthily? Those sorts of things as well. And finally, external reputation and relationships. So what does CQC think of you? Are the families happy? What do care managers think of you? What's your rating with CQC? So what do the local health teams think of you? So what does the external world think of your service? So those are the eight areas we look at. And every year, this is the second year we've done it now, we do a very comprehensive assessment with our managers. This year, the managers have been brilliant and did a really comprehensive portfolio of evidence, a very detailed, very detailed file with all the evidence to demonstrate how they're achieving the targets in those 8 areas. Okay, and then what we do, we were going to go for 4 ratings, but we actually decided to go for 5, and that's worked quite well. So we go from poor, so poor, satisfactory, good, very good, outstanding. Outstanding is really hard to get. This year you had to get 96% in all areas to be outstanding. It's really tough. Out of 110 services in CMG, we only rated 2 as poor this year. Both of those poors are fully compliant with CQC, so that shows that I think we've got higher standards. Very goods are really, really good, just not quite outstanding. The very goods and the outstandings, in my opinion, equate pretty well to the old CQC excellent. 72% of our services were either very good or outstanding. So if we had the old star rating system, I reckon 72% or thereabouts of our services would have been excellent. And the rest, I think, would have been goods, because even the 2 poor ones were fully compliant. So that's how we do that. Any services rated poor or satisfactory, we put an improvement plan in place to support those to improve and work with the managers. Okay, now, getting the culture right is really important, both in an organisation and a service. It's not just about what's written on bits of paper. The most important thing is how senior managers behave, because the behaviour of senior managers, more than anything else, will determine the culture. So having pretty things on paper isn't enough, but it is important, we think, to be very clear what our values are. And we have 4 in CMG, because we like to keep things simple. Shared responsibility, so everyone has a responsibility to support service users. It's not just managers, it's frontline staff. Dignity and respect, I think, hopefully goes without saying. Opportunity to achieve. So what we're about is helping people, however disabled they are, develop their skills, have the best possible quality of life, have new experiences. We should always be stretching the people we support to be able to do more and more, even if it's tiny steps. We should never be complacent. And sustainability, that's a couple of things. There's a couple of things wrapped up in there. Environmentally friendly, really important that we're looking after the environment, doing our bit, but also being cost effective in the current financial climate. We're not wasting money, we're not wasting resources. So those are our values. We train our staff on those at induction. We've now designed our own communication book, and on the front cover of our communication book are these values. Still doesn't mean that staff know them. When I go around 10 services every week, and I very nicely test the staff when I go in, and I say to them, what are CMG's 4 values? And they're getting much better at it, I think, because they've heard I'm going to go and ask them. Occasionally they say social inclusion, and I say not quite, but they are getting better at understanding. We have a discussion about, because people need to know what they mean in practice as well. So we do talk about them in induction. We've recently changed our appraisal process, so the way we appraise our staff directly relates to the values. So we're assessing staff on the extent to which they are living the values in their job, because the danger with values, it's a bit of paper stuck up in the office, but no one actually pays any attention to it. We do try and lead by example, so we do have a culture where senior managers and our clinical team and our assessment team are in services regularly. As I say, I go around 10 every week. I've managed 9 so far this week, so I've got 1 more to do. And our regional directors do that. We don't have a culture of people swanning around in offices. And I think that's important, because you don't earn respect from your staff unless they see you and get to know you. And the best way to know what's going on is actually go out there and have a look, I think. I can sit in my office and receive lots of glossy reports, but it doesn't tell me what's really going on, as well as talking to service users, talking to staff, watching the way that service users and staff are interacting. And little things, Lucia will know about this. I've got a bit of a thing about weeds, right? Weeds and fag butts, and Wilfred knows. And when I go around services, I do nag staff about weeds and fag butts, because I think first impressions are really important. I wouldn't know about weeds and fag butts if I sat in my office, because they don't tend to come in quality assurance reports. Do you know what I mean? Now, however hard you work as an organisation to get the right culture, individual services get their own cultures as well. And particularly where you've got a long-standing staff team, they can be really good cultures. You can get funny cultures that develop. We've had a service recently where we didn't think that there were problems with the quality, but actually it's come to light that there were quite controlling things going on. People locking food cupboards because a service user had diabetes and could be at risk diving in and getting food, but actually there could have been a more creative, less controlling way of doing it. I think the best way of testing whether you've got the right sort of culture in a service or not, whether it's really focused on the service users or actually it's run for the benefit of the staff, is to go in and say, where's the cupboard with the staff mugs in, right? If they say, what they usually do is say, oh, and then realise they shouldn't have said it. If they say, we don't have separate mugs for staff because we share them with the service users, that's a culture that says the staff here genuinely respect the people we support. Because there's a reality out there, people don't like to talk about this, some staff don't see people with learning disabilities as their equal. And that comes out in things like, I wouldn't use the same toilet as them, I'm not going to drink out of the same mug as them, right? That's around. It's in services. We still have it a bit in CMG, though we drive it out to the best of our ability. That's a slippery slope because that's not as bad as Winterbourne View, but once you start the attitude, these people are not really fully human and are not of the same value as me. People will never say that, but that's what's in their head. You'll slip and slip, and before you know it, you've got Winterbourne View on your hands. That's why we've always got to be vigilant. You can never be complacent in this business. And something we've introduced in the last couple of years that works well is we do values and ethics audits. So as well as the normal quality assurance audit, let's look at care plans and check the health and safety checklist and all that stuff. We actually do an audit talking to the staff and service users and looking at what the values and ethics of the staff team are to make sure they're really focused on the needs of the people they're supporting. The other thing we do, anytime we get any problems with quality or safeguarding, we always review them to learn lessons because there's always lessons to be learned. Okay, service users are at the heart of what we do in CMG. We don't just say that, we mean it. And I genuinely believe that to be the case because when I go around to services, even when our staff can't always trot out our 4 values properly, I say to them, what does CMG stand for? They will invariably say, in their own words to the effect of, service users are at the heart of what we do, or we're here for our service users. So that is very much our ethos. And we've done a number of, doesn't mean we're perfect, but we've done a number of things to make sure service users are at the heart of what we do. So we have a service user parliament. We have 10 regions in CMG. Each region has 2 MPs, and they're elected by their peers. They attend a parliament, but they're also supported to hold surgeries where they go around the services and hear what other service users want them to raise. And I and other senior managers meet them regularly to hear what's important to our service user community. An example is a young woman who lives in Essex who stood for election. She's a very bright young woman, but who has a physical disability, and she felt very angry about inaccessible public transport. So she campaigned on that, and she got elected. She met her local MP and hassled him about why haven't we got wheelchair-accessible vehicles. And then she went to meet Boris Johnson, and she gave Boris a hard time, said, Boris, across the whole of London, disabled people need to be able to get into buses that are specially adapted. So that I think is really someone speaking up for what they believe. We also employ a number of our service users as quality checkers. I'm sure you're familiar with this term. They go and do unannounced visits using the REACH standards, and we support them, we train them, we pay them. Our service users are involved in lots of things that we plan in CMG, like our Equality and Diversity Committee. Obviously, people choose their own staff. Where service users are too disabled to be on interview panels, we try and find creative ways like observing how candidates interact with service users to see who we think would be right. This year, for the first time, we introduced an award ceremony for our service users. It was something our MPs were really keen on. We hired a room in a hotel. We had special awards made. There were about 30 awards for achievement in things like employment, education, improvements in health, improvements in independence. It was a fantastic occasion. People were incredibly proud of what they achieved, and they brought their families with them, and the families were incredibly proud. And I spoke to a mum who said, I've never been to anything like this before. This is the first time anybody's celebrated what my son can do. And this young man, he has a mild learning disability, and he runs marathons. Incredibly fit, but nobody's ever celebrated that before. So we're going to do that every year. And we also have an annual service user conference, which we've done for years, and our service users choose the content and how it's organised. Okay, so checking quality. You can't be too rigorous about checking quality. Now, people who know me in CMG know I'm very pernickety, and I'm very fussy, I don't think that's a bad thing, because quality, she is laughing at me, quality can slip so easily, so you've got to be on it all the time, never ever get complacent. Now, we have a quality assurance forum that oversees all our quality assurance activity. It reports to the board, and it has an independent chair, which I think is very important, someone independent to keep us on our toes, a great guy called Roy Taylor, who was for many years the Director of Social Services in Kingston, and he keeps us on our toes. And not that it's ever been needed, but if he ever feels that the management aren't taking things seriously, he has a direct line to the chairman of the board to say, I'm not happy with what the management are doing. He's never had to do it, but he has that if he needs to. Now, every month we identify services that are causing us concern. And anybody in our senior management team that attends this meeting, it's not just operational people, it's our clinic. We have a very good clinical team, we have a very good learning and development team, we have an excellent assessment and referral team. They're all there, and they're all in and out of services, and they're meeting staff. Anybody who has a concern about any service can raise it. So if the training manager says, I was really concerned about the attitude of the staff on a training course the other day, she can say that. If the member of our clinical team says, well, I was doing an assessment with a service user and I really didn't like the way the staff were talking to them, they can raise it, or the line manager can. And we encourage our line managers to be open, not to say, oh, it's my problem, I'm not going to tell anybody, but to be open so we can support them. Now, what I like to think in CMG, we do have problems with our services sometimes, because any big organisation does. At the moment, out of 110, there are 4 that are on my watch list. It doesn't mean the other 106 are perfect, but they're good or very good, but still room to improve. There's 4 that we're concerned about. What I like to think in CMG is there's no dark corners to hide. In some big organisations, the people at the top haven't got a clue what's going on out there, and you can keep quiet, no one notices what you're doing, and provide a pretty shoddy service, and as long as CQC give you compliant, you'll be okay. Hopefully in our organisation that isn't the case. If there's a problem, generally we know about it and we fix it. We also, I've mentioned the fact that our service users assess our services. They use the REACH standards, which I'm sure you're familiar with. More recently, we've recruited 5 teams of relative quality checkers. Now, these are relatives of people in CMG services. They work in pairs. They carry out unannounced inspection visits. Now, they can't do them in services where their son or daughter lives for obvious reasons, but they've worked out themselves what they look at. We said, what do you think is important? They came up with a checklist. They go in, spend 2 or 3 hours there, talk to staff, talk to service users, observe what's going on and write a report and identify any improvements that are needed. And they've been brilliant. Sometimes they spot things that we would spot, like staff aren't interacting with service users sufficiently, or they're not talking to people in a respectful way. But they also, as relatives, look at things that they feel are particularly important, like, is the back garden secure? It's interesting, that's not something I tend to look at, but obviously very important. So that's working really well. On top of that, our regional directors every 3 months do very comprehensive audits where they spend a whole day in a service looking at paperwork, talking to staff, talking to service users, observing interaction, those sorts of things. And on top of all of that, our quality and clinical team do unannounced inspections as well, go in and have a look. But we have learned something about improving quality. A few years ago, we used to have a quality team that would go in, do an inspection and give a manager a 106-point action plan, and off they go again. Now, what the managers would say is, we know, we're struggling, don't give me 106 other things to do, give me a hand to fix it. So what we've now changed it, so our quality team do go in and do inspections, but they will also go in, roll their sleeves up and help fix stuff. And I think that's a lesson, because quite a few organisations have a police force of quality teams who go in and basically do a police inspection and then go away again. Fixing services is bloody hard work, okay? And quite often the manager, however good the manager is, they need a hand. So don't beat them up and just give them more and more things to do. Go and give them some help. Get another buddy manager to go in, have someone from your quality team go in. At the moment in a service I'm concerned about, we're looking to put 3 or 4 people in as a support team to role model, because the staff in that service don't appear to have the skills to support people with complex autism. So, don't just give people long checklists and assume they'll fix it. They're working their hardest, but sometimes they need a bit of extra help. Okay, and all complaints are monitored at our safeguarding board, so which I'll come on to in a minute, where we review them, make sure they're being dealt with, and then look at any lessons we need to learn. So safeguarding, big issue these days, as you know. We have a safeguarding board. Again, Roy, our independent chair, chairs it, meets every month. Every single safeguarding case in CMG gets reviewed. both to make sure that each one's being dealt with properly, but also are there any lessons that we need to learn? So do we need to change our training? Do we need to change our policies and procedures? Those sorts of things we look at. We like to be open and transparent, so local authority representatives are very welcome to come along. And something I found that works quite... As a private provider, any of you in private providers? Hands up? Okay. If you're a private provider, local authorities will immediately assume you're dodgy. That's my experience. You're only in it for the money, you don't care about anything else. So when you've got a safeguarding issue, they'll assume that you won't deal with it properly, and you've got a big trust issue to achieve. If we haven't had a problem for a long time, but if we have a problem with a particular local authority, we say, come to our safeguarding board, come and see us discuss it. And they do, and then they go away saying, wow, that was really good. And it really helps overcome the prejudices in their mind that because you're private sector, you're bound to only be in it for the money and you don't care about quality. So it's worked in that way as well. We train all our staff in safeguarding. It gets discussed at every supervision, every team meeting, and it's regularly discussed with service users. And we support our teams to try and find creative ways of discussing safeguarding. So, for example, using different communication methods. This is an example here of a young woman who's being supported to use a social story, almost a bit like a role play to understand what safeguarding is about. And we also have an independent whistleblowing line, so all our staff know if you're not happy, you don't want to report it through the management structure, this is a number you can phone completely anonymously and raise the concern. Only gets used 3 or 4 times a year, but it's there as an extra safeguard. We tell our staff at induction what the number is, and now we've got our specially printed communication books. On every page of the communication book at the top, it's got the number of the telephone line, just to remind our staff. Whoops. Okay, focus on outcomes. We think outcomes are really important because we're here to help people achieve, improve, and have the best possible life. This jazzy diagram, which looks very complicated, is actually quite straightforward. It's a bit like the STAR model, if you're familiar with the STAR model. We developed this with the Department of Health 3 or 4 years ago. It's called our Wheel of Excellence. Round the outside are 16 things that you would want to measure. So it's got things like maintain personal dignity, keeps employed active and alert, demonstrates confidence and morale, manages money and personal affairs, communicates successfully. So independence, relationships, health and well-being, outcomes. And we monitor those with our service users every 6 months. The blue is the baseline, the green is the target, and the red is progress after 6 months. So what you want to do is see the lines moving towards the outside of the circle. And it's a very powerful way of demonstrating progress to service users, to their families, and to commissioners who pay us. We also do a number of other things. We have a partnership with a charity called Pure Innovations. Pure Innovations are a brilliant organisation with more expertise than us at helping people get jobs. In CMG, we think helping people get jobs is the single most powerful outcome we can help somebody achieve. A very short story on this. There's a young man called Matthew who lives in one of our services, works 2 hours a week in our head office doing admin in our training team. And I went to the home he lives in about 3 weeks ago. The deputy manager was having a retirement do at the weekend, so I went along to the retirement do. And I met Matthew. I met Matthew's mum. And Matthew's mum said to me, Peter, the best thing you've ever done for Matthew is help him get that job, because his confidence is improved, his self-esteem's improved so much, just working 2 hours a week. That's why employment is so, so important. So one of the things we do is every month we monitor how many people we support who've got jobs, whether it's going up or going down. At the moment, we've got 69 people in paid employment and a number of others in voluntary employment. And also, because we're really hot on healthy lifestyles, helping people have fun, encourage their creativity, we run a number of really good events throughout the year in CMG, which are great fun anyway, but also reinforce these principles. So we have a great athletics championship. Every year so far, we've managed to get a real Olympic champion to give out the medals, which is great for the guys. We have a hotly contested football tournament. We have services in England, services in Wales, and they get really competitive, believe me. And they like to have the national anthem played. So at the start, the Welsh will stand up, have the Welsh national anthem, then the English guys. England won 4-2, but it was very hotly contested the last game. How am I doing? Oh my gosh, I've got to speed up a bit. Okay. We also have a Festival of Performing Arts, which is around drama, art, dance. Every year we have a great Black History Month celebration where service users cook food from around the world. We have African drummers. It's a lot of fun, celebrating diversity. Okay, we're also about to launch a Healthy Lifestyles pack, which has got lots of accessible information for service users, encouraging exercise, healthy eating, healthy lifestyles. And we're very proud of this. Last year we developed a partnership with Tottenham Hotspur where 10 of our service users have been trained as qualified sports coaches by Tottenham, and they're now running sports activities for our service users. Okay, very quickly, because I'm running out of time. We also look to learn lessons from elsewhere. I've mentioned Winterbourne View, but regularly, if we come across serious case review reports that are relevant, we look at those at our safeguarding board. So a few months ago, there was one from Southampton where a chap in supported living died because he was neglected, because people assumed he was more able than he was. So we looked at that and made sure we learnt the lessons. We did a lot of reflection following Winterbourne View. As you know, there were various reports after Winterbourne View, and we took action. We asked our managers to regularly discuss restricted practices. We made sure that whistleblowing is put into employment contracts to make sure staff know at the outset about whistleblowing. And we now log every time we use physical intervention, which isn't very often, and we monitor the use of as-required medication as well. That came as a direct result of Winterbourne View. And finally, last but not least, we have brilliant staff in CMG, and it's really important they're valued because they do a tough job sometimes. We have a very comprehensive training program, e-learning, but also lots of specialist training in things like mental health, autism, working with people with offending behaviour. We've introduced in the last year and a half a coaching program so people can be allocated a qualified coach to help them develop their skills in their career. We've got a fast-track program to help people with a lot of potential develop their career quite quickly. We provide an independent advice line if people need counselling or support if they're going through a particularly stressful time. And we do things to celebrate success, like we have an Employee of the Month who's chosen by our service users. We do an annual staff survey, and we always put an action plan in place to respond to any issues our staff raise. And last but not least, we have an annual staff awards ceremony where we have about 30 different awards for things like Home Manager of the Year, best practice in person-centred planning, best practice in equality and diversity, and our staff and managers really enjoy, the fact they're receiving an award and being thankful for what they do. And we do that every September, so we've got the next one coming up. So thank you very much. That's just a brief overview of what we do in CMG. Happy to take questions.